So we are doing 1, 5, which is adding, that's an N, and subtracting real numbers. Okay, adding and subtracting real numbers. So for this first example that we're going to do it on the number line. They're going to say, what is each sum? And then use a number line. Okay. So bear with me on the whole number line thing, because I do want you just to understand where these numbers are coming from and how we come up with them, so that when we move on to bigger things, it makes sense. Okay. So for this first one, we'll call it A. Here's the question. What is the sum? So 2 plus 4. Now, every one of you can tell me right now, 2 plus 4 is what?
76.
Very funny. So if I take a number line, the way I'm going to represent 2 plus 4 on a number line is we're going to start at the number 2. Okay, and then you have 3, 4, 5, 6. What you're doing is from 2 to 6, you're just going to move 4 units, right? 2 plus 4 more units brings you to 6. So how you show it on a number line is that. Some of you might want to do it this way, where you put the line right on the number line. I'm totally fine with that too. So if you want to put it right on the number line or right above the number line, but make sure I can see where did you end. Okay? Now that one seems simple, right? 2 plus 6. We know that. What if we throw in some negatives? So now we do 2 plus, instead of 4, we're going to do 2 plus a negative 4. Okay, think about what that means. On a number line, if I'm at the number 2, okay, and I add a negative 4, what direction am I going to move? To the left, right? And everyone sings the song every time I say it. That's okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4 units to the left. If we figure out what we're doing there, okay, so 4 units to the left, you're at 2 now, so this is negative 1, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, right? So 2 plus a negative 4 is that negative 2, whereas up here, 2 plus 4 was that positive 6, okay? What if instead I do negative 2 plus 4? What's my starting point on the number line? Negative 2. Okay, so we're starting at negative 2. If I say plus 4, am I moving left or right? A positive 4. You're moving to the right. So we're going to go 4 to the right of that. 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right is going to put me here, or if you want to do it up above, that's fine. So if you think about where that is, negative 2 plus 4, that's negative 1, 0, 1, 2. So negative 2 plus 4 puts me at 2. Okay? Last one like this. What if it's negative 2 plus negative 4? Here's our number line. We're starting at what number? At the negative 2. You're always starting at that first number, right? So we started at all those. So negative 2. If I do plus a negative 4, what direction am I moving? Right or left? You're going to go to the left, right? Because it's a negative 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. If I'm at negative 2, this is negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. This point right here would be negative 6. Okay, so you're moving 4 to the left. and you end up at -6, okay? Notice how different, right? It was the same numbers, but positives and negatives being added together. This one was 6. This one was -2. This one was, God bless you, +2. And this one was -6. So you got 4 different answers using very similar questions, okay? So that's where you have to be a little bit careful. Basically, what is happening here is just deciding, am I going to the left or to the right? It's a lot of, is it positive or is it negative, okay? Can anyone tell me what absolute value is? If I said, what's the absolute value of -7, could you tell me what that is? It looks like this. The absolute value of -7. Yeah, Ryan. Yeah, Denise. It's 7, right? It's always the positive version of whatever you see. Basically what it is it's the distance from 0. Okay? So if I'm going -7, I am 7 units away from 0, right? So the absolute value is 7. It's 7 units away. So when you see this absolute value of 3, it's 3. That is 3 units away from 0. When you see the absolute value of -3, it's 3 because it's still 3 units away from 0. It's just that the 1, if this is my 0 and this is -3 and this is +3, right? This is still 3 units and this is still 3 units. It's just one went negative and one went positive. But the distance away is 3 units regardless, okay? So that's absolute value. Which is what's going to play into how we do this adding and subtracting, okay? Here it is. I'm going to write the rule out for you for adding with the same sign and adding with different signs. So first thing we're going to do is if we are adding numbers, with the same sign. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you are adding two numbers that are either both positive or both negative, okay? So if they have the same sign and you are adding them, here's what you do, okay? You are going to add their absolute value. And keep the sign. Okay, here's what I mean. If I have two numbers with the same sign, so -3 plus -7, okay? What's the absolute value of -3? 3. What's the absolute value of -7? 7. So 3 plus 7 is 10. But then you keep the sign. So if they were both negative, you keep it negative. So -3 plus -7 is a -10, okay? Whereas if I did 8 plus 11, okay? They have the same sign. They're both positive. What's 8? What's the absolute value of 8? 8. What's the absolute value of 11? 11. You add them together and you keep the sign. They were positive. So you get 19, okay? So it's just a matter of adding the two numbers' absolute values, but keeping the sign that's attached to them, okay? That's the first one. The second one is the one that tends to give people a little more trouble, and this is adding numbers with different signs. Okay, so if I'm going to add a positive to a negative or a negative to a positive, okay, when they have different signs, what you do is you actually subtract their absolute values. So you're adding, but you're going to be subtracting. subtract their absolute values. Oops. And keep the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. Give you a second if you are writing that down. So subtract their absolute values, keep the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. So here's how I'm going to show you. -3 plus 4 versus 3 plus -4. Okay, so if you look at this, both of those equations, both of those problems have one of each, right? A positive and a negative. When you see that, when you see a positive and a negative and you're adding them together, what you do is you subtract them, okay, but you subtract their absolute value. So the bigger number would be 4 minus the absolute value of 3 is 3. So you get the number 1. Well, the same would be true over here. 4 minus 3 is 1. The difference is on the left side here, the bigger absolute value is the 4, right? The 4 is positive, so your answer is positive, okay? On this one, the bigger absolute value is the -4, right? 4 is bigger than 3. So the negative stays with it, and your answer will be -1. So whatever your absolute value is, the bigger that absolute value is, that's the number you want to look at to figure out which sign gets attached to your number. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's just do a few just to make sure we're good on these. All right, so find the sum. Let's say we do -12 plus 7. Okay, so without plugging it into a calculator, ask yourself, am I actually going to add these or am I going to subtract them? What do you think? We're going to subtract because why? Why are we subtracting? Because there's one of each, right? There's a positive and there's a negative. So when you have one of each sign, you subtract them. So we're going to do 12 minus 7 is 5, okay? Is my answer going to be a positive 5 or a negative 5? That what you were going to say? It's going to be negative because my bigger number was the negative, right? So your answer here is -5. Okay, how about this one? -18 plus -2. Okay, are we adding their absolute value or subtracting their absolute value in this problem? Adding. Why? Yes, that is what you do. Why do you do it? I want you to know why you do it. Because they're both negatives, right? If they have the same sign, you add. If they have different signs, you subtract. Okay? So we're going to add these together. 18 plus 2 is 20. Is my answer going to be positive or negative? It's going to be negative because both of our numbers were negative. Okay? Yeah, Ryan. That's when you add 2 positives or 2 negatives, you keep the sign of whatever your numbers were. So when you add 2 positives, it'll be positive. When you add 2 negatives, it'll be negative. All right, how about this one? -9 plus 13. -9 plus 13. Are you going to add those numbers or subtract them? You're going to subtract them. So 13 minus 9, take the bigger minus the smaller, is 4. Is my answer going to be positive or negative? Positive, right? Because your bigger absolute value is the positive. So your answer here is going to be 4. Okay? Is that clicking? Okay, here's the beauty in this. If it's not clicking, you give it your best shot, and then you check it with your calculator to see if you're right. Okay? I'm not going to take your calculator away completely on this, but I want you to try it without your calculator first, see if you can get it, and then check it with your calculator. Okay? Okay. Then we're going to move into the world of subtracting a little bit. The beauty of it is a lot of very similar things going on here. What are opposites in math? Like if I said, what is the opposite of 7? Negative 7, right? So the negatives and positives, those are the opposites. When we talk about the opposite of a number, if it's positive 7, your opposite is negative 7. If it's negative 7, your opposite is positive 7, right? So like negative 3 and 3 are opposites, or 6 and negative 6 are opposites, okay? So you might see, and I won't refer to this a whole lot because it's terminology that I don't feel like you need necessarily, but when they say additive inverse in your book, they're talking about a number and its opposite, okay? So there is a property that we're going to look at. It's called the inverse property. I promise there's not as many properties this chapter as there were the last one. Inverse property of addition. And it says this. If you take a number and you add its opposite to it, so if you have A and you add a negative A, what are you going to get? 0, right? A plus negative A is 0. So the additive inverse says if you take a number and you add its negative, you will get 0. So like negative 3 plus 3 should get you 0, okay? So keeping that idea in mind, we're going to move into...
I think we're late on the spiritual level.
Spiritual. Wow, okay. Maybe I should get rid of some of this junk under here and then that won't happen. We're going to move into the subtracting side of things. And this is real quick, again, just a couple examples. But subtracting real numbers. Okay. Here's the rule. To subtract a real number, add its opposite. Okay, to subtract a real number, you add its opposite. So if I'm doing 3 minus 5, okay, instead of subtracting 5 from 3, what I can do is I can add the opposite of the number, right? So 3 minus 5 is the same as 3 plus a negative 5. And that you just learned how to do, right? So that's the beauty of it. If you turn it into an addition problem instead of a subtraction problem, you know how to do the addition problems. So when I do 3 plus a negative 5, am I adding or subtracting those two numbers? If there's one of each, you subtract, right? So 5 minus 3 is 2. Is my answer going to be positive or negative if this is my problem? Negative, because my bigger number is the negative. So your answer would be negative 2. Okay? Same goes here. What if it's 3 minus a negative 5? Okay? Instead of subtracting, I can add the what? Opposite, right? So if I'm adding the opposite minus a negative, you will hear me say this a million times in this class. Are you ready for it?
Oh, yeah.
Minus a negative is plus a positive. So if you see minus a negative, you can just add 2 crossbars, and that's your problem. right? Minus a negative is plus a positive. So you're really doing 3 plus 5, which is 8. Okay, so when you're subtracting, really you're adding the opposite. So I'm going to give you 3 problems like this, and then we're done. This is example 3. So the first one is negative 8 minus a negative 13. All right? Okay. So we're subtracting numbers, which means we should really add the opposite. So what's a different way you could write this problem? Negative 8 plus a positive 13. Okay, so now if we're adding, think back to the adding stuff. You have one of each, a positive and a negative. Are you adding them or subtracting them? When there's one of each, add or subtract? Subtract them, right? So you're really going to do 13 minus 8, which is what? 5, okay? Is our answer positive or negative? It's positive because our bigger absolute value is positive. So your answer to negative 8 minus a negative 13 is 5. Okay? You with me, gentlemen? How about this one? If I give you 3.5 minus 12.4. Okay, 3.5 minus 12.4. So if you're subtracting, you're actually adding the what? The opposite. So you're going to do 3.5 plus a negative 12.4. Okay, do I add those two numbers or subtract them? If there's one of each, you subtract. So you're going to do 12.4 minus 3.5. And at this point, if decimals throw you off and you can't do that in your head, that's totally fine. Plug it into your calculator, 12.4 minus 3.5. But what you should get is 8.9. Okay? Is our answer going to be positive or negative? If this is what we're solving, my bigger absolute value is the positive or the negative? The negative, right? 12.4 as an absolute value is bigger than 3.5. So your answer is a negative 8.9. Okay? And again, you have a beautiful calculator. Check it. If you didn't get it right, plug it into your calculator. Make sure you get it right. Okay? But I want you to try it without. All right, what about this? 9 minus 9. Which I know is very simple, but think of it in terms of if we're going to change it. Subtracting a positive is the same as adding the opposite, right? And here's where your inverse property comes into play. A number plus its opposite is 0, right? So you get 0. Okay? So it's just adding and subtracting real numbers is what we're doing. Try it without your calculator first, then you may plug it into your calculator to check it. But I want to know that you get how to get there, okay? And if you're not getting it, if your calculator is telling you something different than your brain, talk to me and I will re-walk you through the rules of it, okay? Any questions? All right.